Okay, we are live and in stereo. Let's see here. All right. Let's see here. Give it just a minute here. We've got, oh, so this is good. So this tells me how many people are signed in. Give it 2 minutes and then we'll start. All right, let's get started. And thanks everybody for signing in. Hopefully we get some more viewers in the next couple minutes. My name is David Bilodeau, and I'm an attorney in Newton, Massachusetts, and I am joined by Gary Todd, who is a partner at Todd & Weld in downtown Boston. And I am also joined by the illustrious Nan Sauer, Robertson
and
Sauer.
My dogs.
And Christine McGuire, also of Robert Sauer, and we are all family law attorneys. Gary, you do estate litigation too, right?
Yes, probate litigation.
Probate litigation. Nan, do you guys do any estate work?
We do a little bit of estate work, as Christine's hand will indicate.
I do some probate stuff, guardianships, conservatorships, estates.
Oh, good, great. Well, thanks everybody. This is actually the first YouTube stream that we'll hopefully be doing more. The plan is for this to go for about an hour. And today we're just going to talk about our experience in the probate and family court. Apparently we can talk about some estate stuff too if we get there, and which is good. And yeah, so how are you guys doing? Are you exhausted? Are you energized?
I don't know what month it is.
I know every day sort of feels like a Monday. What a world we find ourselves in.
It's a very interesting thing. I've got an 18-month-old at home, so we're all getting through.
I know. It's a real, I have a lot of clients who, I'm sure you guys do too. People, they don't really know how to handle some of this stuff, having the kids at home, and it's caused a lot of different issues. Is that some of the things you're seeing in your practice?
Yes.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about the courts. The latest and greatest. We all, at least the lawyers, we got an announcement from the SJC that more or less said, the panel can correct me if I'm wrong, but it more or less said that the court is not going to be open to the public, probably for most of June, if not a little later. The court is starting to do telephonic hearings, and soon, hopefully, Zoom teleconference hearings. And I've done a few telephone hearings. Have any of you guys done a Zoom hearing yet?
I have.
Oh, really? How did that go?
It was interesting. We had a status conference that was on for a Thursday. On Monday evening, we got an email saying, "Do you want to do a Zoom tomorrow?"
Oh, wow.
We ended up doing it on the Friday, and it went pretty fine. I think that everyone was on. One of the parties was audio only, but we went with it. It started with the clerk. The judge came in. We did our hearing. It went pretty smoothly considering. I mean, the parties got sworn in, and I think everything right now is just a little bit last minute. Is kind of you're finding out that they have time for you, and so you go from thinking your status hearing is canceled and you'll get a new date to we're doing it tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. That was one of the things I've been seeing. I don't know about the rest of you, but you think you're not sure if you're going to have your hearing, and a couple days beforehand you find out whether it's going to happen or not.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's made it, at least for me, I'm interested in what you guys have to say, but that's been one of the challenges. You know, I had a pretrial, I think the first week of May. It was a telephonic hearing, and we had no idea, you know, if we were going forward, you know, should we do the pretrial memo? Should we do the 4-way? It sort of all came together at the last second.
How much lead time did you get, David, for confirming that that was on?
I think it was, let's see, the hearing was on it was originally scheduled for I think I found out on the 1st that the hearing that was scheduled for the 5th was moved to the 7th. So I guess I ended up getting like 5 days.
Okay.
Well, three business days really.
It's also, it's interesting, David, with well, now the courts all have the licenses for the Zoom hearings, but it's very organized because the judge has the ability to mute somebody.
Oh, so, I know. That's nice.
Dan and I are arguing, and I speak out of turn, or I'm speaking over her. I can see down in the left-hand corner that I've been muted. So it's a good way for the judges to, you know, control the courts. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. It's always been my dream to be able to mute Gary. So,
Christine, did the judge take advantage of the mute feature?
Not that I could tell. It was a pretty well organized hearing, and it unfortunately, because it was Middlesex, and Middlesex is obviously just reorganized, and so it was a new judge. So there was a lot she had to catch up on in terms of, and there were motions on too that they did actually hear. I think we only got heard because it was on for status, but when they found out there were motions, they decided to go for it. But it does seem like they're getting a little bit more organized. We have a couple telephonic hearings next week, one Middlesex, one Essex, that we got notice of last week. So it seems like they're getting a little bit better about sending out notice and scheduling and et cetera. But I don't think that's uniform. I think it's judge to judge.
And Christine, did you witness or observe that the litigants and the attorneys are a lot more respectful during the Zoom and the telephone hearings? That was my impression.
I think so. And I think some of it is the ability to like text your attorney, all those things that like in the hearing, they would be trying to like feel like they want to jump in, or they're like reacting. Like we really coached our client to put herself on mute and to not say anything unless addressed, and to text us any thoughts or anything that comes up. And I think that enabled like what can sometimes be a very emotional when you're in front of a judge and someone saying something. It kind of allowed a little bit, but I think, yeah, it is to a degree. That's when you're in court, there's a lot of emotions. You've been sitting and waiting for a really long time.
Right.
And you really just didn't have that experience with the Zoom.
Yeah, because you're not in the same room with that opposing party. Yeah.
You can also instruct your client, please put all cell phones away, put your device on mute until and unless the judge asks you a question. And that way, even if they speak, nobody can hear them.
Right. They blurt something out. Yeah.
Yeah, there were very strict keep yourself on mute rules that we put in place.
Well, one thing that was interesting, I had a Middlesex hearing on Monday, a telephone hearing, and the judge at the outset said, listen, this is obvious. This was in Cambridge, not in Lowell. You know, the phone system is ancient, and if you talk at the same time as I talk, I can't hear anything.
Right.
And I actually heard, you know, it actually went relatively smooth. The judge had to sort of jump in a couple times, but I actually could hear on the line, I'm assuming it was from the judge's line, there was like, when multiple people talked, I could actually hear like a static. Right. I was like, oh, this judge didn't hear anything that just happened. So, you know, hopefully they can all move to Zoom sooner than later.
And there is the ultimate threat from the judge. If you speak over each other or if you're disrespectful, the call will be terminated.
Yep.
And you're not in front of the judge, say, oh, one more thing. The hearing's over, literally.
Yeah.
What other experiences has anybody had with telephone or Zoom conferences or hearings rather? Any other interesting stories you want to share?
You know, it's interesting. Those that I've had, case manager, can you please get me so and so, and they have them immediately.
Nope, we're losing you, Gary.
Yeah, Gary's breaking up.
That's what
I
happens.
apologize.
He's at the
No,
beach.
the technology, the judges have at their fingertips all of the pleadings that have been filed, and the hearings that I've had have been wonderful.
That's great.
I think the big thing for me has been the confusion leading up to it, which is how to get pleadings. Like we had those motions on and we needed to get oppositions filed, and it's figuring out how to file it in the appropriate way. Is it emailing the clerk? Is it e-file? Is it, in the case of Norfolk County, is it putting it in the box outside the court?
Yep.
Like every court is doing, and Essex County has a dedicated email address for filing. So it's just figuring out how to get it. And we're emailing people at Middlesex who say, I'm not the clerk dealing with this. And we have a different clerk who's scheduling the telephonic hearing than is actually the clerk on the case. So we're sending her pleadings and she's saying, you shouldn't be sending these to me. You need to send these to this person. And that's the confusion leading up to it. I've had a couple telephonic hearings and I've had the one Zoom, and all of them, once you get into the process, have gone relatively smoothly. It's just the confusion leading up to it.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to let people know before we get back on topic here that feel free to, there should be a chat box on the side of on the YouTube page. Feel free to jump in with questions. We will do our best to answer them. Nan will happily field any and all questions. So yeah, and in terms of filing, I mean, I think it has been a bit of a struggle. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes.
I mean, I've had similar experiences. I know that we did a panel a week ago, and David Fleischman had some instructions about that. But the e-filing website has been challenging to use. But I think my experience with it, and I'm interested in everybody else, but I've had many rejections to the ETH, so it's been tough trying to figure that out, like what's going to get accepted, what's not going to get accepted. We had a time-sensitive filing in one instance, and I actually ended up my paralegal ended up having to drive to Norfolk and drop it in the box to make sure it got there. Are you guys seeing that sort of thing too?
Yes. I had an experience where it wasn't e-filing, it was actually paper filing, and I think because staff is limited right now, it took longer for me to find out that the filing had an issue that needed to be addressed than it would normally have taken. So it was in the case it was fine, there was no detriment, but I could see that being a problem if you had a time sensitive filing. That paper filings are I think taking a little longer, at least in my experience, and I don't know what the other folks have found with the paper filing.
I would say that I was surprised how well it's worked.
That's good. It might have just been me. I could have been the problem.
User error. Well, that's the other thing too. I mean, but the other thing I've run into is, and I had this question in a panel I was on yesterday. How have you? I've actually noticed a bit of a lag time on getting summonses. Have you guys experienced that?
Yes.
Do you have any tips for how we can get our summons a little faster?
Well, I shouldn't say it's always been slow. I actually did an e-filing in Middlesex and got the summons pretty quickly, like within a week of the
Oh, wow.
filing.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's good to know.
Yeah. So I think it's going to depend. I
Yeah.
really do.
Now, are you guys calling in once you e-file, or messaging or emailing the clerks directly? What are the tips we can share about that you've had success with?
In the one I just described, I didn't make any follow-up call. I did the e-filing. There was an initial rejection, and then the second one went through, and then we got the summons within a week, and that was without any follow-up at all.
Oh, wow.
No follow-up calls, no follow-up emails. It just magically appeared in the mailbox.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I give great thanks and I commend everyone in the court. When you do follow up, they're very pleasant and respectful, and they will check into it and get right back to you. It's
Gary, we can't hear you right now.
But I mean,
very good experience.
yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, I can also attest to that. I mean, the staff that I've talked to many staff members, and everyone has been super, super friendly, and clerks are actually like, they don't seem annoyed about getting emails. At least that's been my experience. I mean, so that is actually, that's actually worked out really well for me so far.
Yeah, I think across the board for me, everyone I've emailed or called has been really nice. I know, a few counties have set up kind of general email addresses for people to direct questions. I've always gotten really quick responses, even if it's just, I'm going to forward this to someone else. So that's been really nice, because there obviously are a lot of questions right now as to how to do things. And I had an administrative filing, a petition for sale of real estate in Norfolk County that I emailed some questions, got answers right back, and they ended up, after filing, allowing it administratively, in less than 2 weeks. So, which I was pretty happy.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that is great. Has anyone had any cases or filings or hearings where they've had to had to deal with the pro se?
Not yet.
Almost.
Almost. The only, I mean, I haven't actually had a hearing yet with a pro se, but I have had, I've run into the issue where I had to file a complaint with the pro se on the other side. And, you have to physically get it over there, which is a bit of a drag, but so the process, I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just a little slower.
Right.
So.
I have a case with the pro se on the other side where we have a pending motion to compel. And so I've reached out by email to find out if that's going to be done administratively, or if we're going to have our hearing that it's supposed to be next week. And I haven't heard anything. And so I CC'd him on the email to the clerk asking about it. And I haven't really gotten any feedback back as to what's going on with that and how they want to proceed.
You haven't heard from the pro se litigant?
I haven't heard from the clerk who I asked the question on, and I haven't heard from the pro se litigant either. No. You
just haven't heard from anybody.
No one's responding.
Oh no. Here's a question. Is there an email directory for all the clerks? There is, but their contact information's not in there, right? Their emails aren't there.
Right.
I think that there have been publications, I could be wrong, but I think there have been publications that might have been county specific that included that information.
There he is.
Because you can definitely find all their names, and so you can kind of put it together.
Yeah, you can usually reverse engineer what the email might be.
But I think there have been publications. Gary, you just came back. The question was, is there a directory of all the clerks with their contact information? And I think there is. Yeah.
There is. And David, if you'd like, I can send that to you if you want to publish it.
Oh, great. Yeah. Do you know where people can find that, Gary?
I had sent, I will find it for you and send it to you.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
find it. I know we did a memo when we sent it to the court, and I'm happy to send it to you and you can pass it along.
Gary, do you want to run down some of the recent announcements we were talking about before?
Sure. There was actually some, I'm just pulling them up now, some great publications which assist practitioners when having a Zoom hearing before the court. Let me just get those for you. While I'm finding it, Nan can tell us a good story.
Well, I just want to let everyone know I got a private communication complimenting me on my shirt. So that's one. It's a very
tell us
important
story about that shirt. There's got to
the
be a story.
There's no story. There's no story. I'm wondering if anybody on the call has had a custody issue during this period of time where one of the parents has said you can't visit the child because of COVID, right? I don't want any transfer of anything happening. I'd be curious to hear. And David, I don't know if you've got it set up so that the participants can talk on this, or is this a listen only?
They
Okay.
can just they've got they can see us, but they're not part of the Zoom. They can type into they can interface with us through the chat on YouTube.
Okay.
So the floor is yours.
Mine or Gary's? Is Gary still looking up his documents?
Well, I have them. There are three great publications. One was by the BBA Ethics Committee, Pandemic Advisory, April 2020. And David, I'll send you these three if you want to pass them out.
Great, thanks.
And this just talks about how you can deal with the ethical dilemmas. Did I lose you? Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're kind of cutting in and out a little.
I apologize.
That's okay.
It's the offshore breeze. So I'll send you the BBA Ethics Advisory. And then two great brochures. One was promulgated by the Superior Court Civil Committee, dated May 4th, which is 16 tips for attorneys and self-represented litigants before the court. It's fantastic. And a wonderful read was the Mass Appeals Court Guide to Use of Zoom Video Conferencing for Oral Arguments. It is a fantastic piece of literature on all of the tips for presenting a argument before the court. Practical tips as far as preparation during your presentation, and again, tips such as Nan talked about, turning off all electronic devices, having your device on mute while when you're not speaking in case a dog jumps or a child comes in your room. It's wonderful. And I'll send these three to you, David, if you want to pass them about, but I certainly recommend in the very quick reads that everybody who's going to present before a judge read them.
Great, thank you. Have any of you done Zoom depositions?
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh, not.
I have one next week.
Okay, I've done a couple. I mean, you know what I was going to say on Gary, to apropos of what Gary was saying is, you know, I mean, I think I'm interested in your opinions, but I mean, I think the only way this is going to work in any sustainable fashion for the next, you know, God only knows, 6, 12, 18, 24 months. I mean, the court is going to have, even when they reopen, they're going to have to keep doing Zooms. I mean, that's just my thought. I mean, I don't know how they're going to, you know, if there's a staggered opening where they're only letting 25% of, you know, their normal caseloads in. I mean, the backload's just going to keep mounting, and it's going to be impossible to manage. So I don't see how they get it done without the phone hearings and the Zoom hearings, even for, you know, a long time coming.
Right. And David, before this pandemic, unfortunately fell upon us, that had been discussed for years.
Oh, really?
Having telephonic hearings and staggered hearings telephonically, and it brought this about because of this unfortunate situation. But I think it's worked out well, and I think it's here to stay.
Well, that'd be great. I mean, there's a lot of good that might come out of this, and I'm sure we've all wanted e-filing for a long time, you know.
Yes.
Now, it's sort of a drag to have to drive into downtown or wherever to just to file a motion or something like that. This is going to, hopefully some of these technological advances for the court stick around.
David, I so miss driving into town. I can't wait to sit in traffic, see people.
Oh, I know. So we actually just got a couple questions. And Nan had mentioned this earlier, so maybe this is a good thing to do. We got a couple emails here. I'm getting emailed by some folks. There was a New York decision that just came down.
Yeah, that's the one I was referring to.
Yeah, matter of SV versus AJ. Nan, do you want to tell people what the case was about?
Oh, sure.
You volunteered.
I can actually, did I? Let me see if I can share. Do you mind if I share it, or can I do that? Let's see.
You share.
Nope.
Oh, you mean share your
Disabled.
screen?
Yeah.
Like David can allow you to share.
Yeah, let's see here. I can share my screen too.
I can tell you while you're working on that.
You can try that.
Okay.
It should work now.
Let me see.
There we go.
There's my desktop. Can you see
short
it there?
decision.
Yes.
Only 7 pages.
So you can see the citation is 2020 New York slip op 0103. And I'm getting some echo here. So it essentially the father wanted to. I'm getting an echo, David. I don't know if you can hear that.
Do you have the video on somewhere else?
I don't.
In the background? Oh, I'm not sure. Here, let me try and
You know what I'll do, David? I'll email that document to you.
Here, let me try and share it and see if it's better.
Okay.
I just shut off your sharing.
Yep.
You've got the floor, Nan.
Do I? All right. So, yeah, I mean, it's essentially that, one of the parents, the father in this case, filed to enforce his right to have in-person visitation with his kids, and also some other relief such as makeup visitation. And I'm still hearing the echo for myself.
All right, I'm going to stop the sharing.
So essentially, the court said that, just to sum it up, that the mother's generalized concerns about COVID-19 were not sufficient to prevent the father from having time with his kids. That's the gist of it. And I'm hearing a big echo, so it's hard for me to talk here.
Yeah, I can hear too. I'm not sure where it's coming from. Well, yeah, it's an interesting decision. Have any of you been experiencing any cases with that similar issue?
Yes. I actually had a case which it is not currently active, but had an issue come up where there was supervised visitation, and there was an issue with the supervisor being able to participate, and that has caused a cessation of the visit. So that's a complicated version of that case, because not only is it just a concern about COVID-19, but there's also a supervisor that's involved. So I'd be curious to know if anybody else has had a similar case like that.
Yes, and I know of cases where the supervised visitation has morphed currently into supervised Zoom visitation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
that,
it's temporary.
I mean, I've probably had, I don't know, a dozen different client calls with, former clients who aren't sure how to handle their parenting plan. I've had a couple cases where someone lives out of state, and it's time for a monthly visit. One case in particular I could think of, and are we going to let that visit happen or not?
Right.
That's a really challenging issue. And then what if someone, what if one of the parents brings in one of the biggest, I don't know if you guys have had this, but I have had several cases where someone asked me if the other parent brought their new significant other into the house, how does that play into exposures, and whether they should be revoking the parenting time because the other parent is increasing the nexus of exposure within their house when they don't have to.
Yep. Yeah, I'm actually a parenting coordinator on one case where that sort of issue came up like a month ago. And actually a part of it was that the parents hadn't spoken recently about what each other was doing. One of the parents was concerned because she thought that the other parent was driving a taxi, and she was concerned that that was exposing him to, God knows how many people every day in his job. And it turned out that he was actually doing something different that had less exposure. And so, the concern, there were valid concerns raised by both parents, actually, different concerns about exposure for different reasons. And what I found was just simply conducting a communication between the parents and me allowed everybody to learn more about the current situation and feel more comfortable that the visits could in fact take place, and that there were precautions, properly being taken. Everybody was social distancing, everybody was wearing masks and things like that. So I think a part of some of the resolution of issues is going to be people talking and having more conversation, right? Yeah. That guy. Yeah. So I think that's, in a way, this situation has forced people to have conversations that they wouldn't normally have. So in a way, I don't want to say it's been good, but there have been positive developments. Yeah, from the necessity of communicating in a different way has given people more information than they might otherwise have had.
The other I apologize, Christine.
I was just going to say, we've had a couple threats of changing parent, this and that. And what we've done in kind of some of those cases where it felt like an empty threat anyway, was we kind of quoted Chief Justice Casey's letter from the very beginning that says, essentially that parenting schedules are parenting schedules and nothing has changed. So absence an order, the parenting schedule will continue. And we actually had one case where the other side, who was concerned about it, he seems to have voluntarily given up his parenting time. So, in other cases, it feels like an empty threat and everything continues on. But I think what Dan said about communication, we've had a few where it's like, I think he's taking the kids to, play dates or the other way. And I think a lot of communication and making, I don't think they're putting masks on the kids. And then you have a conversation. No, everyone's wearing masks. So it kind of is different ways.
And Chief Casey has done such a wonderful job during these challenging times. I think he really has.
It's a lot.
Yeah,
it's a lot.
That's a very tough job to be in. There's no doubt about that.
The other
challenge, that letter came out early, and that letter has been very helpful to throw that language out.
Right. The other challenge that we're faced is where one of the parents happens to be on the front line as a healthcare provider.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I actually haven't had any of those cases yet, but what about you, Gary?
I have, they find their way to the courts, and the judges will have to deal with them. If you're going to uh, impose a self quarantine on a doctor because he or she has been in a hospital, that's a very difficult thing to ask of a parent.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the things I'm wondering about, which I don't know if any of you has any feedback or thoughts, but are the things that happen during this period, going to be held against or factored in when making new decisions about parenting schedules? So for instance, the schools are closed or camps are closed. So maybe one parent is spending significantly more time than they did, under the whatever the schedule was that was ordered or agreed to. Well, does that open the door for a change when this is all over? And how would the courts even think about that?
Oh, it's an interesting question.
And Nan, I'm sure you've seen as a parenting coordinator, where there is no March and there is no April school vacation, are they entitled to that vacation time or makeup time?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had the issue come to me to be resolved, but I can certainly see that would be an issue, right? Because everybody's on a different schedule, out of necessity. And, I think to answer your question, David, I think that, yeah, certainly it'll factor in, but it's a complicated situation, right? It's not just that parent A has more time with the kids and has done a good job of it. It's that there's a pandemic.
Yeah,
I mean, all that has also happened.
I hope that the judges, when they look at this stuff, are mindful of the unique circumstances and that it's really, or at least I hope to God, it's an asterisk on all of our lives and not,
Yeah.
the status quo.
Yeah, right. Because I think a part of that too is what if a parent is suddenly furloughed from their job and they have now more parenting time available and they've served as a de facto caretaker during
Right.
the day
Mhm.
because they can. That's just it's a factor, but I think it can't be exclusive and considered outside the circumstances.
Here's a question. This is a good transition for us. What is happening with cases where the payor stopped paying support? I'm assuming job loss or reduction of income due to coronavirus. I've gotten several of those cases. I'm sure you guys have too. Any feedback from the court on this issue yet?
I don't have feedback from the court on it, but what I would say is that the minute your client tells you they've lost their job, you should file without question. That's been the message all along. File the complaint right away. Don't wait to file until the court is open because who knows when that's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Get it all in there and get it in front of the judges so that they can, maybe have an emergency hearing. It might not be considered an emergency though, just the job loss, but at least get that modification moving. That's to me the most important thing.
Yeah, and Nan, I think you and I may have both been on the same Zoom where one of the panelists said that like these are going to be addressed kind of in order.
In the order in which they've been filed. Yeah.
Right. So you don't want to wait because then you're behind everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Waiting, thinking that, oh, if I go in person and file, it'll be better than this,
Mm-hmm.
filing by mail now is not, I don't think, a good approach.
Right.
I mean, I just did which I thought was an interesting idea. I reached a settlement in a case. One of the parties had the job had I don't know if the job is officially lost, but the wages were temporarily suspended at a minimum. So there was, no money to pay support. And what we ended up, so I think the real issue with this problem is that you go in, this could turn into like 2 or 3 modifications, right? So you go in and you seek, termination, suspension, reduction of the support because of what's just happened. But then is there some sort of look back for the whole year at some point once the person starts earning again? And then what do you do next year when you're back to full, how do you, I mean, I don't know if you're actually, probably can't get into court that many times, but that's sort of what I think the way it plays out, right? It's like you need a correction today, and then maybe you need some sort of look back, and then what do you do going forward once we're back to normal? So we, in this particular case, we entered into a stipulation that basically gave the guy a moratorium for a period of time, and then we had like a look back. So, I mean, I thought that was a creative way of trying to, right the ship. You sort of look at it as like a whole year problem. Like we're in this together and we just gotta, hope to God it's just a 1 year correction and then we're back on track with the original separation agreement at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. And I would imagine that the judges are going to be looking at it in that manner. They're going to try to make some reasonable, assessment and reasonable result come from it, knowing what everybody's going through right now. They have to.
Has anyone tried to get heard? Has anyone tried to schedule a motion hearing to suspend support? I have
not.
That.
No.
So I don't even know how, my understanding, I don't think those cases are getting high priority in the pecking order these days, but I guess I'm not 100% sure on that.
I mean, that's kind of been I think the messaging out of the court is that financial stuff is not top priority. I've had hearings on guardianships. And now finally seeing over the last couple of weeks, them getting to pretrial conferences, status conferences. But I think it's, it'll be interesting when we start hearing actual motions.
Right.
So the follow-up question from the same viewer is, what in that scenario, what if ample funds are available to pay support during a downturn in income? Mm-hmm. So this goes to the need question, or ability to pay question, I guess.
Okay, right.
So what do you think, Gary?
I don't, if there's an ability to pay, I don't think the court would hear it currently because you wouldn't be able to show an emergency.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But the court would have the ability to grant some retroactive relief on the road.
So what I think you want to do is, if it may result in an inability of the payor to suspend the support if they have enough money tucked away.
Temporarily.
Yeah.
Right, but they can still modify retroactively to account for that.
Right. So as Nan said, you want to definitely file, serve, and then when the courts are able to hear you, ask for retroactive relief.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have any of you run into issues with discovery because of coronavirus? Attorneys saying we're not gonna. I actually had a couple of attorneys tell me we can't do depositions because of the SJC order, which was interesting.
Yes, a lot of
yes.
A lot of troubles trying to get discovery done. I mean, as far as I can tell, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, where all systems go. I mean, if you send out an RPD, it's still due in 30 days. I mean, you got to do your depositions by Zoom, but you can still do them. There's really no restrictions that I'm aware of right now, other than anything that requires face-to-face contact, right?
Well, David, what is your view if someone opposes doing a deposition by Zoom? Do you think that they're obligated to participate if they don't agree to do that?
That's a good question. Well, I think the SJC order, my read on it is that I guess it would be the same rules as to why if you could get out of a deposition that's face-to-face, right? I mean, I guess I don't know the answer to that. But I would think they'd have to do it.
I think I'm in a position on a case where we're going to have to file a motion to compel them to show up because they're telling us that they have no interest in doing anything until it can be done face-to-face, and that goes for the deposition, for any conciliation. So they're telling us they're not even going to entertain any dates before at least July. And so we're in a position of a case where we have to get it moving, So it's very interesting. I think a lot of people are jumping through hoops to participate, which is good. I mean, we have one case where the other side went out and bought a webcam for, you know, the client needed to buy a webcam. But then we have some people who are just, you know, wanting to sit in their hands, and you know, it's unfortunate because I think everybody's doing the best they can for the most part.
You have to be you know, understanding if someone is sheltering in place in Montana, they don't have access to the records.
Yeah. Well, so I've done two depositions by Zoom, and I actually found them to be very easy. I mean, I didn't have any problem at all. I mean, it was a little slower getting everybody going. You know, we put a couple extra things on the record, but I mean, I thought it was totally fine. I mean, I was originally worried there was going to be issues with, you know, the lawyer text messaging with the client or something like that, and I didn't think that was going on. So, and there's you can share documents and you can transfer documents with Zoom. So,
Right.
I mean, I actually I had no problem at all. Maybe I'll do that going forward. Keeps me from having to go anywhere.
And I think there's also specialized software that some of the stenos use too. And I wish I remembered what it was offhand, but I had an attorney tell me about a very positive experience they had on a deposition where the steno actually was using this separate piece of
Right.
software that allowed you to, you know, kind of electronically hand, here's my first exhibit, you know, mark it exhibit 1 and hand it virtually to the deponent. So there's specialized software in addition to Zoom that I think can make it even more seamless. Maybe I'll look that up while we're sitting here.
This is the comment coming in from the chat. This is based on the CLE we did last week. When David asked Judge Allen about whether video depositions would be enforced, she said that discovery would move forward. Right. I have an attorney saying she won't do video conference depots. So I mean, I think that's wrong. I think it's the same. I think that all the normal rules for depositions apply. It's just you can't force someone to do it face to face. I mean, that's my read on it.
Yep.
I agree.
So, what other interesting issues are people seeing?
Interesting issues. I can't think of any.
I think one thing is kind of as you're wrapping up a case, like when you have an agreement and it's when are you going to get that uncontested hearing?
Oh, let's talk about that. Has anyone had a 1A yet?
No.
So I have to double check the dates. I have my first 1A next Thursday with in Norfolk, and I think we submitted the paperwork at some point, and I have to double check, but I think it was early to mid-April. We have a telephone 1A hearing. So I think they're starting to do it. But I have heard, I talked to a clerk in Worcester and was told that they wouldn't be doing any 1As until the courts reopened.
Right. Well,
we have a telephone. I was going to say, we have a telephone pretrial conference on a case next week. So we're trying to rush through this. We have like terms. We just need to like get the separation agreement like finalized and signed because we're hoping to use, since we actually have a telephone hearing on that one, to try and get that together really quickly. But I haven't seen anything about anything else being scheduled.
I know there was a debate between the judges whether, as the statute reads, after hearing, a 1A can be granted. Would a telephone conference be considered a hearing?
Oh, that's very interesting. So what I did in this case, which I thought was clever, but apparently no one bought it, was so I'm sure we've all experienced this where someone doesn't show up. You know, you do a motion to waive an appearance. Someone can't make it. So what I did in this particular case was both sides, we were on the same page about it just to give it a shot. We filed 2 motions to waive appearance, one for each party. And then we filed a motion to accept to allow administratively, and we had them both sign affidavits, sort of going through the colloquy. I was wondering if that was going to get it done, but we ended up getting this same case. We got this telephone hearing next week, so I guess that's the way Norfolk's going to be doing it, at least.
Right. Done administratively without a hearing.
Yeah. Sorry, Gary, you cut out.
Oh, it'd just be interesting whether a 1A could be conducted administratively without a hearing.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure the answer to that.
The software for depositions is called E-Depose, D-E-P-O-Z-E.
Oh, interesting. I have to check that out. Is it just like Zoom?
I don't know. I only heard tell of it. I haven't actually seen it.
I mean, just to go back to some of the custody stuff, one of the interesting things that I've seen, it sounds like other people have seen this too, is people seem more interested in working together than they used to. Maybe I think it's finally, I think people are finally realizing or coming to the conclusion that they probably can't get relief from the courts as quickly or as easily as they used to be able to. I actually have clients now saying, is there anything we can do outside of court to get this issue sorted out? Well, what could we say to the other side to try and manage this out of the courthouse on, really difficult cases? So I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, and some of the courts are doing are trying to do settlement conferences and encourage people, sometimes by order, to participate in a settlement conference. So I know that I've volunteered in Norfolk to be a settlement conciliator, and I got an order in the mail the other day from one of the judges there appointing me to conduct that conference.
Oh,
and it's
cool.
just, it's just a way to try to get the parties together, and you spend a couple hours with them, and maybe they at least narrow the issues so that the next time they're in court, they're presenting 3 contested issues instead of 6. So I think the individual courts are doing things like that. And I would encourage anyone who's listening here, if you have some time, to make it known that you'd like to help out, because it's an enormous help to the court to get rid of some of the cases that can be settled and get them out of the way to leave room for the more contentious matters. So.
Yeah, I know Middlesex is taking all of their trials for at least June, if not prior to that, and they're sending it to the Middlesex County Bar Association's conciliation. So we have a trial that's on for beginning of June that's now been referred to conciliation. Both parties had to agree to it, but that's what we're doing now, because the courts, we're not going to have our June trial, so they want to see if we can resolve it through conciliation.
Yeah.
I think people are very receptive of the, as Judge Gorman sent out the conciliation letters. Everybody seems to be happy to conciliate and start to resolve these cases.
Yeah.
And the conciliation is very inexpensive, isn't it?
Yes.
Middlesex County is, I think, $50 per party.
I mean, that's nothing compared to a trial.
Right.
It's free if you use me as a volunteer.
Oh, really? You do free? You do free?
For the Norfolk program that I referred to. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not all the time, David.
Oh, all right. All right. So, do you need to take the conciliation training to take cases?
I presume so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they're probably not even offering that now, right?
You mean to take to get? Yeah, no.
Yeah. Do any of you have experience with a litigant who refuses to discuss any settlement, has ample funds to take their ex to court, and refuses to comply with discovery? Sounds like a difficult case.
Right.
Ever in my career or right now?
Well, how would you handle something like that right now, Nan?
If
would you just file?
So if the opposing party is refusing to cooperate, Yeah.
Just do it by the book.
Right.
You have to. Yeah.
Despite COVID. Yeah. I mean, I think that's unfortunately, yeah, you just have to file and deal with the court as it is, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's Rule 78. So we have on some of our motions to compel that were kind of pending when this happened. We followed up with motions, pursuant to Rule 78, which is, the new rule about how the court will rule on things administratively or telephonically if possible. And so we followed up with motions that way, asking the court to, move forward with it. And I think that's the best you can do.
Oh, that's interesting. We were talking about that last week in a panel. So you've had the experience the courts are accepting those requests?
Well,
Yes.
I mean, I filed them. I don't.
Oh, I think that's awesome. I mean,
Yeah, they
especially
are.
on discovery
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
it's a great way to do it.
They
So in my-
definitely are.
Yeah, my Zoom hearing that we had last week with Judge Cafazzo, or it might have been 2 weeks ago. I have no idea what day it is, but she, we had some motions that we had filed that weren't on for that day, so weren't heard. And she, of her own accord, said that pursuant to 78, that she would rule on those and ask the opposing party to file oppositions. On the other cases I filed motions. I haven't, on the ones that I personally filed the 78 motions on, I haven't heard back yet, but the courts are doing stuff pursuant to 78. And
Now, you have to have agreement of the other side though, right? Or can
Right.
you ask the court to do it?
My understanding is you can ask for Rule 78 over the objection of the other side.
Oh,
yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah.
We had a motion that we put together pursuant to Rule 78 and basically said that there was no reason for the other side to oppose it.
it's sort of
and
like a
please
request
do
for
it.
summary judgment, right? There's no facts in dispute.
Right.
Just make the decision.
Yeah, because we were doing this on like a motion to compel. We're like, they haven't provided documents.
Yeah.
I don't know
Right.
what opposition there could be to them
Right.
not.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I think
basically,
document.
deciding it on the papers.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there could be things in dispute, but the dispute is laid out in the paperwork. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you're saying aside from you could say the facts are in dispute.
Right. But they can be ruled on and resolved by the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of ask the court to rule to order the other side to file an opposition within a certain amount of time, and then after that, they'll rule on the papers.
No, that sounds like a great way to try and get some business done.
Definitely. That's what we would like to do, is get some business done.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is tough though. I mean, I've got a lot of people. I mean, I'm sure you guys are experiencing this too, but you sort of feel like you're in quicksand a little bit. It's like, what can I do to help move these cases forward? Like, and I'm sure people are frustrated because, and it's compounded by the fact that they're sitting at home all day, like stewing on it. There's less distractions, and they keep calling and say, what's going on? Get this moving. And it puts us in a tough spot, I feel like.
Well, or there are many more distractions depending on their circumstances at home.
I've certainly seen both. I have some
Yeah.
clients who said, like, I've got so much to deal with right now. My kids are out of school, all this stuff. Can we just, everything is working fine now. Let's just sit on it. And then we've had the other people that, an email every other day. That's like, what's going on? So I think it really depends on the client and the case.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
There's only so much Tiger King to go around.
I can't believe I watched that.
They can watch.
Well, it looks like you're living it. Any closing thoughts anyone wants to share?
Oh, I miss seeing everybody though,
Exactly.
I know it'd be nice to get back to real life.
for sure.
Have you gone to Sammy's yet, Nan?
No, I have not.
Take out.
David, sorry.
All right.
I have
You're missing
not.
out. You're missing out on one of the best sandwiches in your neck of the woods.
I know, I've heard. I'm making a note of it now.
Christine, how about you? Have you gone to Sammy's?
No,
Oh.
and I am, stuck at home with a toddler and all that stuff. So daycare's reopened. I'm back in that office, and
Nan's gonna spring for Sammy's for everybody.
Yeah.
I will.
I'm gonna make note of that right now.
It's on the record right now. There's no taking it back.
It's official. All right. Well, thank you, Nan,
Thank you.
Christine, Gary. Thank you very much. So thank you, audience, for tuning in. the next, I completely forgotten, but apparently Monday is Memorial Day. So, but
It could be Labor Day. We
could be
don't know.
Who knows? So I have another stream scheduled for next Wednesday at 4 p.m. And Patricia Brady, who does a lot of GAL work and parent coordinating, she's going to be on. And we will have another special guest that is yet to be determined, but hopefully a retired judge that I'll be able to rope in. So feel free to tune in. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panel.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right,
David.
take care. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, Dave. Bye, Nan. Bye, Christine.
See you guys.